Yeah.
You've actually done the best job out of anyone so far at putting the microphone in like the perfect fucking place. Because like that sounds fantastic. Like, you've done a great job there. Like, very well done. Very well done.
Thank you.
In saying that though, welcome back to Fit Focus Media, the show where we put the focus on fitness. Now today we are joined by Mariah Jean. But who is that? Who is Mariah?
And I was out on the phone doing my steps and literally tears streaming down my face, like having a mental breakdown. Mind you, a year prior, we'd lost a child. Actually, not even a year. And I can't tell you, of all the things I've been through in my life, the anorexia, the bullying, having the shit beat out of me, the sexual assault, like the DV relationships, having my partner kick me physically, like actually kick me. Like you name it, everything painful on this earth. There was nothing more painful than when I lost my child. And I remember that feeling of like, you've already taken so much away from me. And this is something I've never even spoken about. I prepped into ICN. I remember waiting there, like, and I won. I won, and I actually cried. And the second time I was on stage, I won an overall. I won classic figure overall, and again, like, I was just blown away. Like I was like,
well, she's a person just like you and me. But Mariah, can you do me a little bit of a favour and give a bit of a backstory for yourself on people who might not be aware?
So
it's a lot of pressure when I put it that way, isn't it? Even though
who are you?
So we have this conversation back and forth very easily when there's nothing rolling, and then as soon as I do this big announcer voice, it's just like, shit, we actually got to do this now.
This is deep. You're asking me to do some like self-reflection here. Well, I mean, from like a factual perspective, I'm 29 years old. I'm almost 30. I'm not one to round myself up yet. Yet. 5 months left, buddy. I'm 29 years. I'm hanging on to my 20s for dear life, right?
Yeah. Hey, you are a fresh 20-year-old. You know, just living the 20s out to the fullest.
Yes, exactly. So still in my 20s. I am a coach, an online coach, sports nutritionist, and trainer. So I pretty much cover all bases when it comes to wanting to overhaul your health and fitness and your nutrition. It's like an all-encompassed experience, as well as mindset, mentorship, business coaching. I literally cover every single aspect across the fitness industry. And I've been doing this for full-time now, online, almost 2 years, fully online. And then before that, the online realm, I was kind of part-time PT and online, but all together 5 years roughly. Part-time doing, I was like running a gym a few years ago as well. So I've been a gym manager. Oh yeah.
How'd you find that?
I managed to Snap Fitness. Say no more.
I was just saying, there's a funny story with that one actually.
Oh, okay.
Well, see, when I was doing the transitioning phase over into the Fit Focus Media more full time, I was working at a gym as an MC. Mm-hmm. And I won't say too much on the company itself, just because there were things that went on with us, and I'm just not a massive fan of them, really. In saying that, when I was exiting out of that company, I actually had the offer come through to go in for an interview with a club manager position with a Snap. Went through all of that. We did all of the interviews. They're like, "Yep, awesome. We want you. This is perfect for it." And then I kind of was like, "Hey, thanks for the offer, but I think I want to go after a pipe dream of video."
Right.
So,
how crazy is it though that you can, like, one split decision like that can change your life forever?
I'm not gonna lie, I was absolutely shitting myself, and there was multiple calls with mum over that week, pretty much just being like, "Holy crap," because I actually had multiple offers at the time from a few different places as well, or it was like, "Do I go out and try this on my own?" And it was like, "This is a lot. This is very secure. This is an absolute fucking dream."
Security is an illusion though, right? Because we all think that we have this security in our jobs, and when we're employed that's it, forever, right? But I mean, you can lose your job in an instant. That company could go bust. You can underperform, be miserable in your position. There are so many things that put you at risk in a secure position.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship and owning your own business, it really comes down to putting in enough effort in the beginning for that to then be the kind of roll-on effect for what will be the most exciting time of your life, Yeah,
and it's kind of actually like what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where it was like security really, all that kind of does is make you complacent, really. And
yes.
You kind of get so comfortable that you stop doing anything. Like
Well, it's
stop
autopilot.
It's like you stop trying to progress at things because, well, you don't have to. There's no real need to. Like,
Yeah.
especially if you are in a comfortable position, it's like, well, where do I really go from there? And why would I want to do anything more than that? It's like, I'm already comfortable. Isn't that the point? Like, the goal is to be comfortable. Then why do I need to change from here?
Yeah. It's interesting that people kind of glorify comfort as well. It's like when I'm in a position where nothing phases me and I can put my goggles on and I don't have to think about anything. I think that's complacency is one of the most dangerous positions you can get into in life, because you don't know your potential beyond that point, right? So it's like limitations. People just put a ceiling right above their head and there they go. They just sit there. But they don't realize that they're the person who keeps the ceiling there. You can remove that ceiling at any point in your life. You can literally just keep stepping up. There's
limiting beliefs.
Yeah, self-limiting beliefs, and everyone's full of them. I come across this a lot with clients, is that when they come to me at first, their self-confidence is shot, and it's usually as a result because it's all extrinsically, like it's all from the outer. Everything is coming from outside in, and they're kind of accepting everything inwards, and they're not really putting anything out, or even nothing is happening inside. So
yeah, but I feel at the same time that having limiting beliefs and having these thoughts is a very natural thing to have, and it's something that occurs to all of us. I mean, at the same time, I have had those thoughts all the time, and they still pop up here and there.
Yeah,
and it's like, so for someone like yourself, where you have this, I guess, very outward look on it, and you can identify the fact that it's not beneficial in any sense whatsoever. Has there been anything in particular that you've done or found helpful to actually help move past those limiting beliefs yourself and for clients?
Acknowledge the thoughts for what they are. I think it's so important to understand that if you're having those thoughts, that they are a negative thought. I think people they limit themselves and then that's it. They're not really reflecting on it. They're not sitting back and saying, I probably could have done that. I could have given myself a chance to just push that little bit harder. If they don't reflect, if you can't reflect upon something, even from a neutral standpoint, I think people get really beat themselves up for it as well. It's like, I did something wrong, or I didn't quite get what I wanted to. I didn't get the promotion, or I didn't work hard enough, or that relationship failed, or whatever it might have been. And they sit with those, but then there's nothing from there. It's just like, I'm a piece of shit. Dot.
Damn, that is a fucking good response. Jesus, that was very well done.
Moving forward is really my biggest piece of advice.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess the biggest thing that pops into my mind from what you've just said there is that when something negative happens, people see that as a full stop, the end of story, the close of the book, not just a chapter that happens to be happening, or just an occurrence that happened in day-to-day life, because that's the part of being a damn human.
Yeah, I mean, the way I describe life is it's not a race, it's an obstacle course, and there's also no time limit. I think some people are going to get stuck on the rope. Some people are going to get stuck in the mud. So many experiences of an obstacle course are really humbling. I literally did a raw challenge a couple of years ago just to see how I went with it. And I was going gung-ho for a lot of the really physically challenging things. And I realized the runs were slowing me down because my physical fitness was questionable. Cardio fitness. I used to run 10K a day. 9 years ago, I was a runner. I've been through all of these crazy transitions in fitness, but I think that the experience of the obstacle course was a representation of life. And for me, that really stood out, where it's there's going to be really humbling moments. And if you let your ego get in the way, and if you screw up or you stuff up, you make a mistake, and then you kind of sit on the ground and have a childlike tantrum, well, then that's where you'll stay,
So for someone who has performed so well in a competitive scene for both fitness as well as, excel extremely well when it comes to business, what have some of the biggest hurdles been so far?
Oh, wow. Where do I start?
Right at the beginning.
I mean, if we were to talk fitness related, I think one of the biggest hurdles with my training was to understand I couldn't rush my training. If I was to, I started training when I was 20, so almost 10 years ago now. And I think in the beginning, I suppose in the beginning I limited myself with that too. So it wasn't just, feeling like I was rushing my training. I mean, I think I look back then and I think that I wanted to hit PBs all the time. I was just I want to get stronger. I want to be the best at everything. It's
isn't that crazy that we just want to keep being better and better and better and better? God damn it.
But then the issue there is, I think that with training is you can never be satisfied with where you are. And I think that kind of creates a superiority complex. I was never content with what I had right in front of me. I could never just look at myself in the mirror or with what I was achieving with my fitness and say, well done. Like that's amazing. I could never congratulate myself. I could never say, this is really good. I could never practice that positive self-talk. This was years ago. Because I was so fascinated with what was more or better, or what she had, or what he had, or what that person was doing. I was, again, extrinsically motivated. It was all what everything else around me was possible that wasn't actually in front of me. There was no like that whole mindfulness and gratitude thing. None of that existed, in my training life. I think now I'm super humble with it. I know that if I get injured, I'm going to take a step back. But I don't see that as a terrible thing. Like as I said, it's an obstacle course. You fall down, you get back up again. I think the biggest lesson with training was that it's humbling. Like it's so humbling, and you'll never get anywhere trying to push super hard, super quickly with it. It's an artwork. You're slowly just teetering away there at it. And I mean, that's bodybuilding in general. I think that we have to be so patient with the process. There's all these like new age bodybuilders coming out and like frustrated that they're not seeing significant gains in 6 months or a year. And that's the beginning.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's sort of like tying into what you just said there, as well as the, people even now wanting these massive progression gains right out of the gate. I mean, even when I first got into training, I went from being very overweight at the time to losing a lot of weight really quickly. And for me personally, it was, like being bullied for being overweight, and then being bullied for being the fit kid and going to the gym and all this sort of shit. So it really, I guess, in my mind, at least at the time, sort of framed that there was never anything that was good enough. There was never any, there was no sense
to who?
To anyone. It always just felt like, and this is, I guess, the reason for bringing this up is tying back to what you were saying about this, just like never feeling like you're enough, or never feeling like it's good enough, or always feeling like you need to be pushing hard or doing better. But for me, at least, it was being in this position where it felt like externally, that was where I was seeking all my validation was.
Yeah.
And then I was getting rejection from being like, while I was at this point, and then rejection while I was at this point. And for me, mentally, it was just like, there is like, what the fuck am I meant to be doing here? And I guess the perception that gave me of myself when I was growing up and going through schooling was really messed up. It led to a lot of issues with binge eating, with like I couldn't go out to dinner with family. I would have full on just like panic attacks, tantrums, like go off my absolute nut at people. It was terrible, and it really took a very long time to sort of readjust, shift away, and it took me getting out of the fitness industry for like training pretty much completely for a couple of years while I was living overseas, just to almost get back to a sense of just baseline normality and reality for a person to start with. Yeah. Before I could then start reintroducing things back in. And then it's only been, again, just recently, after sort of getting more involved with the actual community side of the competitive sport, meeting more people who are involved with it and seeing the transformations, the journeys, the stories, and seeing just how many people have had similar situations where they've actually had to deal with being fucked up. Yes. That has actually allowed me to be able to look at myself and be like, hey, you're doing pretty good.
You're normalizing it for yourself, yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, after seeking validation from people for so long growing up and feeling like it was never good enough, it's been a really cool feeling just to actually be like, hey, I don't give a shit. Yeah. To be honest. Yeah. This is how I am. This is what I'm doing. At the end of the day, if I want to change that, it's in my power to do that, and it's my responsibility and right to do that. No one else's. Correct. And it doesn't matter in any way. That was a bit of a tangent, but that was just something that kind of got sparked by what you had said there.
It goes from extrinsic to intrinsic. It becomes something that's internal, and that's honestly, it all boils down to that. It all comes back to this very fragile, inner being that we have, and it starts from childhood. I mean, we really do start our younger years quite innocent to it all, but I mean, from the time that you literally are launched into the scene of, primary school and the like, and you're having to associate with people, you're having to connect with people in social situations, and it is daunting. And it's daunting no matter how old you are, where you are in life and where you are in society, because again, you're geared by this idea that it's up to everybody else as to, I suppose, the way you need to run your life. It's like you're constantly listening to everybody's advice, but it's always conflicting. So how do you make them all happy? And my piece of advice is don't don't do it.
And it's very it is very hard to actually do that, but it is it is very hard to do that. But it's very it's very helpful.
Oh, it's
it's very beneficial.
Oh my God,
but at the same time, that comes into the fact that pretty much everything that is difficult is probably actually good for you, which is why we don't do it most of the time.
The avoidance technique. Oh, love that.
Hey, how's it going? Hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Just wanted to take a second and ask if you could please leave a review on this podcast. And if you hear something you think could help someone else, share it with a friend. Word of mouth is really the best way to help these things grow. So please, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the episode. Yeah.
I've done that for a few years with a few things. I actually really respect that you went through that stage in your life where you had to pull yourself out of the fitness industry and go back in, because I think that most of us who are super driven and neurotic about this process, really, when it comes down to it, we have to be obsessed with it, have probably gone through that. If we've got this far into it, 10-year mark of training. And this is what's interesting, is that other coaches, especially coaches who've been in the industry for 20, 30 years, they look upon me and they're like, oh, you're so new to the industry. Like, you're just a baby and you wouldn't know what you're talking about. I'm like, mate, I've been doing this with myself for 10 years consistently, and I have fallen off the bandwagon. And I have been in situations, I was in a similar situation to you in that I got obsessed, but like toxically obsessed, to the point where every single morsel I had to be calorie counting every single thing. I was diagnosed with 2 different eating disorders at the age of 20, and I refused to accept the diagnosis. I was bulimic. Like, I was throwing up for a good year before anyone knew about it. So it was all secretive. It was an addiction. It was like being on drugs. Like, for me, I didn't understand any of it. You think about, so where are we? 2022. So 2012, roughly, 2013. Back then, if you had told someone you were bulimic, it was disgusting. Like, people found out you were vomiting, like, yuck. I mean, you can't even, that thought is just, even it gives me like the heebie-jeebies thinking about it now, because it's been years. But I held so much guilt around food. But I think when you look at eating disorders, because I got down to 45 kilos, mind you, like, I'm 169 centimeters. Like, I'm a tallish girl, and I'm now, almost 70 kilos?
Strong as all hell now.
Strong.
I got put to shame before, Jesus Christ.
I feel like, you know what? It's fine. We won't talk about the weights that happened before. You got some in, I got some in.
Yeah, we won't talk about that. It was a good session though, so you would have already seen that at the start of the episode, so hope you liked it.
Yeah. Just a FYI though, like, you did beat me in most of those lifts,
No, we don't talk about the weights, remember? They don't matter at all. Right?
Ego stays at the door. Ego stays at the door. I actually made you hit PBs from...
You did.
Today.
I doubted myself. And, Mariah's just confidence and coaching just led me through it. And we pushed those baby weights just right up in the air. And
I'm going to be honest, I picked up the dumbbells and he had to pick up heavier dumbbells than me. Which is pretty much it. It was like, cannot do heavier than me.
The funniest part was probably when you almost dropped them on your face.
That was hilarious. It's not because I'm not strong enough. It's because I get the giggles. And
with just a lap pull downs and your arms just weren't
They were
working.
very shaky. Yeah. I was trying to kind of like pretend like I was trying to kind of keep my tough pants on, but I was really struggling. I think back to the whole, I was binge eating too. Like, that's what led to my bulimia, was that I got so fascinated with scale weight and like weight loss. For me, like, losing weight was, I suppose, my only focus. Like, 19, 20 years old, like, what do you focus on? With your fitness, what's the marker? It's like, okay, well, if I can just get as skinny as possible, if I can just lose as much weight as possible, then again, I can justify my worth to the world. I can look for that external validation. And I got it. People were congratulating me for losing 20 kilos. Like, fuck, I wish I had have met me now back then, and for me to just slap myself in the face and say, stop, because you're putting your life at risk. But it took hospitalization. It took two times I was hospitalized for being underweight. They honestly threatened me with like a food drip. It's a lot to talk about, sorry. And it was just like, it wasn't a turning point in my life yet. Like, I was willing to die. I was at a point where I was like, you know what, if I die in this process, I don't care. I didn't really have enough of a purpose in life, I think, where I was there and that was it, you know? And then once I was there, it felt like I was stuck there, you know, that I couldn't get out of it. It was this cycle, this never-ending obsession. And I think there are certain personalities who are more inclined to this than others. So I don't think everybody's going to end up with an eating disorder. But you end up with something. You end up with, you know, anyone listening to this podcast, someone has abused alcohol, has abused drugs, they vape, they smoke, they do anything to numb the pain. And bulimia for me was just the next progression, because I, you know, was so hungry where I was eating such little calories that I would end up binge eating uncontrollably. Like, you're talking boxes and boxes of muesli bars and, like, you know, bowls of cereal, and then feeling like, who the fuck am I? What am I doing? And having to grasp yourself in that moment and get control of yourself, but you can't. And then that's where the bulimia kicked in, where it was like, I didn't even read about how to become bulimic. I just felt so sick and so crappy about myself that was the next stage. And so when it progressed to bulimia, I mean, if you really want to look up the highest suicide rates for mental health conditions, it's eating disorders. It's the highest killer, you know, like, and I'm not lying about that. It's just hidden. No one really talks about it, because everyone, even alcoholism, is kind of considered an eating disorder in a certain aspect, because it's considered a macronutrient, a non-essential macronutrient, mind you, but a macronutrient. And I ended up not feeling like I couldn't escape from it twice within the space of a year, and I attempted an overdose twice. It's not common knowledge. Like, I think some people probably know that I have made 2 attempts on my life, and they were near successful. The second one was more so. And I remember the second time I came out of a coma after 2 days, and I'm not sure whether it was, I actually can't remember most of it. I don't know whether it was because of the overdose or whether it was induced. It's honestly just a blur. I couldn't speak properly, so my speech was impaired and everything like that. And I remember just having the clothes on my back and sitting in mental health ward, like, I just had the same clothes. I had no shoes on or anything. And I think I'd spent, the first time was 2 weeks in mental health ward. They wouldn't let me out. And then the next one was 6 days or something. And my mum picked me up. She first couldn't deal with it the first time it happened. The second time it happened, she picked me up because they'd kind of been passed from parent to parent, you know. Just wasn't mentally stable enough to really live by myself. And she picked me up, and I remember having these clothes on my back and, like, just nothing on my feet. And I walked out to the car. And I just thought, I have nothing. Like, I have my partner at the time, who I was in a DV relationship with, like, had broken up with me on both occasions because he couldn't deal with it. And I had nothing. They took my car off me. Like, they took everything from me. Honestly, for a good reason. Would you give your car to somebody who was mentally unstable, or their car? Like, you wouldn't let them drive it, you know. People were trying to protect me, and I was done. I was just done. And to think that I got to that stage back then, and no one knew. Like, no one knew that, you know, I'd done that. Like, nobody knew. There was no social media posting on, you know, I'm in hospital. It was complete silence. I just disappeared for 3 weeks, actually, from the second attempt. And then I laid in bed for 3 weeks and I barely ate again. And I had a handful, maybe 2 or 3 people who found out. My mum contacted them, male friends of all people, not even previous lovers or anything, you know, like, these were just men in my life who cared about me. And they were gym goers as well. And they'd been in similar situations. And they came and they sat by my bedside and they read to me and painted my nails. Just, you know, did small things that distracted me from my thoughts. Played me self-help CDs. I look back on that time in my life, and when people are 20, 21 now and they're telling me, like, man, like, this shit's hard, like, you know, I live at home, it's really hard, and this is hard, and I can't find a job or whatever it might be, I'm like, you're doing amazing. Like, honestly, you're doing so good. You know, keep going. You're doing amazing. Because I had no job. Like, I had to leave, obviously, you know. Can't try and kill yourself and then rock up to work the next day. So twice I lost my job to my mental health. And I had to not work for 3 weeks. And the only person who could save me from that situation in that time, like who was the person who could save me after I had literally milked every possibility? It was me. I hated myself up until that point. I despised myself. And it came out in every single way possible, I think, that I could have drank myself to oblivion when I was younger, or abused drugs, smoked. I was a chain smoker, like you name it. I found every way possible to fill that hole. And I think those 3 weeks where I laid in bed was the turning point in my life where I realized the only person who was going to get me out of that bed was me. And I did. Like, I got out of bed. So I'm here 10 years later, getting out of bed every day. And I think that's probably the small thing, is that my mother used to say to me, the one thing you do today is get out of bed, you've won. Because she saw me not get out of bed for weeks on end. And so I start with that every day. And people think that where I've gotten to today, they think that I'm some sort of like stoic character that's just like unstoppable, and, you know, I get up every day and I'm super inspirational. I got this like morning routine down pat. No, fuck no. I don't. You know, I make a 6-figure income doing what I do. Like I do well. I do really well now. But like, it starts with getting out of bed for me every day, and being diagnosed with 6 different mental health diagnoses is heavy, which I denied for years. And now I'd rather talk about it, and I'd rather say to people, it's okay for things to fucking suck. Like, it's okay for things to feel like that. And it's okay for you to feel like you can't do anything, you know, at the time. It's okay to feel that for a bit. But get out of bed. Like, get out of bed. Just start with getting out of bed. And then it becomes something from that. Each time you congratulate yourself for the small things. Make your bed. Make yourself a cup of coffee. Sit in the sunshine for 10 minutes. And by the end of the day, the things you'll have accomplished, even if it isn't extensive, even if it is just a handful of things, you did that. That was you. You were the person who saved you that day. No matter what happened, no matter what was thrown at you. So you become your best friend in that process. And that's where I learned to take myself for coffee and take myself to the markets and go shopping for fresh fruit and vegetables. I was shopping at op shops because I couldn't afford clothes. So it's, you know, $2 shirts and things. And it was like weird, but hitting rock bottom and having nothing in my life made me discover how plentiful my life was with nothing, because it was me. I had control the whole time. Yeah. So that would be, I suppose, the very dark and deep story behind what created who I am today, and all of the ins and outs between. Trust me, there were many fuck-ups from there to now. But that was the lowest point. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate you actually telling me that.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's this heavy shit, man. Like, it's hard to talk about that sort of stuff. It's hard to live through that sort of stuff.
I honestly didn't feel alive for most of that. Honestly, I felt like I was just coasting, you know, like it just didn't feel real. But I'm glad I did. I'm really glad I did. I think that without that, I wouldn't be able to be the coach I am today, that's for sure. I can see it when it's happening to people. You know, I can see when their mental health is declining, or where it's probably not in a very good spot. And mind you, like, I'm not a psych, you know. I don't want to be one. My mum's one. My mum is a psychologist. I'd never want to be in that position, but yeah, I think when it comes to mental health and health and fitness and nutrition, the interesting thing is it is so interwoven. And we try and treat them like they're separate. You know, we send people to a psychologist and we send people to a nutritionist and we send people to, it's kind of like sending someone to a podiatrist and then sending them to a chiropractor, and there's all these different specialists, but like really mental health is encompassed in fitness and nutrition, because one of the biggest pillars of my life for becoming stable again was taking care of myself, was actually having a better relationship with food, was establishing a routine with my training that wasn't me running 10 kilometers a day on top of my 2 hours of gym, you know, not over exercising. It was respecting my fitness and my nutrition. That's a big thing, is that we disrespect ourselves through our training and our nutrition to the extent where it becomes toxic and unhealthy. And there's that fine balance where I think that if we go too far, we tip ourselves over the edge and we go back into that where we began using those toxic substances, just using food, using exercise as a coping mechanism. So even if you're starting a health and fitness journey, you've got to understand, if you're going to go into it, you can't run at it like you're charging at it, right? You can't do that. You're going to lose every time if you keep doing that. It's about finding that equilibrium. So it took me a long time to find that again, like 3-4 years of recovery from that eating disorder to just be able to eat food and not think twice about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow. Wow. Huh. So there's part of me that wants to go down the route of just like continuing with another question, with another conversation. There's part of me that actually wants to go
There's so much more.
There's part of me that actually wants to go a little bit into, I guess, my background on things, because I feel like, again, it's actually rather similar in a lot of cases there. But at the same time, there's actually a lot of things in my own personal life that I haven't, I guess, like, I'm comfortable with saying it around a lot of people, but I guess there's just certain things that I'm still not aware if it's...
Impact?
Yeah.
We're ready at different stages, I'll tell you that. Like,
it's just like, I think still that like slight fear of just being judged for things. Like having people just look at you about something you've said, about something you've done, about something that's happened to you, and just being like, you know, like...
You know, I found that the more that I practiced transparency, the more warm and positive the feedback was. I think that, and this is honestly, I'm going to be honest, I didn't talk about my eating disorder or my suicide attempts until I was 26, until after my first competition. So that's 6 years of silence.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a long time. And you know what? You don't have to either. I think that's important to understand, that I'm in a position now where I can help people with my story, and I'm more than happy to do so because I've done my healing. You know, it's heavy, it's hard, and it always takes me back to that place. But I always bring myself back around to, I've done my healing and I'm not that person anymore. I never will be. And it's safe for me now. Everyone's in a different position with their story or where they are at. You know, some people might go 20, 30 years and not be able to talk about it, and that's okay. Sometimes it's not beneficial for them to. But I think it's important for those who can and who are okay to talk, to normalize it, because even people listening to this, I'm going to touch a few people. Like, there's going to be people who go, yep, I've done that. That's me. I've done that too. I've been there. And they don't even have to talk about it either. They can just use this. This can be part of their healing. And a part of my healing was listening to other people's stories and journeys and absorbing that and learning and going, oh my God, I'm human. I'm okay. Like, you know, I'm not a bad person. I'm not a piece of shit. I'm okay. There's other people experience this too. And this is okay. That's a lot of that self-reassurance has to come from not isolating yourself constantly.
Sure. Would you like to hear my story?
I would love to hear your story.
All right.
Even if you don't end up airing it, you know, we can talk about this even just, you know, openly.
Let's get into it. All right.
I have that natural aura about me, though. It's much easier to talk to me about this type of stuff. No judgment.
It's always good just to be able to actually talk about things without having to worry about it. Keep on scrolling. Gotta love it when there's like just old Instagram accounts that you never use ever. So pretty much, like I sort of said earlier, when I was younger, I was severely overweight, got bullied a lot in school for that. This was actually like right before I lost a lot of the weight. But so the left-hand side was at 12. And then
Far out.
following that was 1 year between.
Wow.
Between the two photos.
Did you say 1 year?
Yeah.
Shit.
So that was 1 year. I went from being about this tall and about 110 kilos to pretty much my same height now. And I think I was down to around 60 or
Far
so.
out.
So it was a massive just sort of shift in the way that I looked. And again, when it comes to even like bullying through primary school, it was one of those situations where, even in like grade 2, like grade 2 was probably like the earliest like memory of it. I think there might have been a little before that. But grade 2 in particular, we had a portable school building at my school. And it was one of those things where recess and lunch every single day, there was this group of 4 guys who were a few years above me. And they would just pin me up against the wall and knee me in the nuts every single recess and lunch.
Jesus.
It's just for like no apparent fucking reason. And, I'd go to the principal about it and be like, fucking cry my eyes out and just like, being like, tell them what happened. They'd bring up like the school photos because I didn't know who they were. They'd tell me to point out who it was. They'd get in trouble and then it would get worse.
Yeah.
And I'd go home from school and my parents would ask how my day was and, I'd be upset and I'd be pissed off and, they'd always want to try and do their best to try and help improve that situation and to make it, as best as possible. But it seemed like anything that, was done to try and help would just make the situation worse realistically. And what that did was it led to me being very aggressive towards my family in particular and the people around me, and just holding a lot of resentment towards the world pretty much as a whole. And for me, at least, it was one of those situations where, I turned to food as just a massive coping mechanism at the time. I remember for a while, Dad was working at Macca's. So we would, every single night, that's where we would go for dinner. It was like just a routine. It was just a habit. And it got to the point where, even, say with that, I remember I have a scar, down the inside of my lip from one time when I crashed my scooter. Because my scooter had massive fucking wheels on it because I wanted a scooter for Christmas. So my parents got me a scooter, but I was actually too heavy to get a normal scooter for kids. So I had to get this massive fuck off one with these massive tires. So of course going down this hill, it got even quicker and quicker and quicker. And I'm smashing into a metal rail, but that's another thing completely. Pretty much it got to the point where, I was so, overweight to, they ended up taking me to a dietitian and, I had to go through all this and they ended up taking me to a psychologist as well. And they tried to, fucking ask me questions. And all that did to me was just signify that there was this massive problem that I wasn't ready to accept and that I, felt wasn't my fault. I was just trying my best to deal with it. And it got to a point where in that photo, we ended up having to, we had physical locks on the cupboard doors so that I couldn't take food
I remember
at night.
that.
Yeah, because again, this is between the ages of say, 8 to 11 or so. I'd sneak out of my room at night and grab Oreos and biscuits and chips and all this sort of shit out of the cupboard. I'd literally take a big water bottle out the back because that's where we kept cans of soft drink, and I would just be quietly opening them and drinking fucking cans of multiple liters of Coke and Sprite, all this sort of shit at night, while also just eating a bunch of food. And it was just this concurring effect of just getting worse. The more I ate, the heavier I got. The more I got bullied. The more anger I held towards the people around me and the people, in my family in particular. Yeah. And, I ended up getting to a point where, I guess after high school, I was just kind of fuck this, I'm going to a new school. It's time to, it's a fresh start. So going into that, sort of the year 7, year 8 area, ended up getting into the gym for the first time. I went to a local rec center for a one-off thing and absolutely just loved it.
Yeah.
It was cool. Actually, sorry. At the time also, so that photo there was actually, taken after my first ever boxing fight. So I got into boxing as well.
Wow.
Which was awesome. I love that. And I really have actually been wanting to get back into boxing because that was sort of where it all started. My coach from that and the people I met there were really some of the massive, turning factors into
yes,
what actually happened.
The mentors in your life.
Exactly, because it was the people who believed in me and showed me that, hey, you can do this.
They didn't treat you any differently.
exactly. I just felt like a normal kid that was having fun with
You
everyone. And it was awesome.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about family and the people that are that surround us is they get frustrated, right? And so then we have these mentors that come into our life, like I am for many people, that have fresh eyes. And it's our job not to be biased. So we have to believe in you, and we actually do. That's the wonderful thing, is that these people who were helping you, with your boxing, they wanted nothing but goodness for you. And that's where genuine kindness comes from.
Yeah, true. And it is one of those things, I am very glad that I can actually look back on, like my childhood in hindsight, and I can, because I held a lot of resentments, particularly towards like my family, my parents, and actually looking back on hindsight and just coming to the realization of just how much of, how much pain I was actually causing and how much hurt I was causing, without even realizing it, was really, I guess, just a shock factor to me to just be like, hey, all right, this is something that's happened before. Like, this is a part of our life. We can't change this. This is something that's happened. But, we have to just move forward from that. Correct. And accept the fact that it is what it is, really. It has already happened.
Mutual forgiveness is wonderful.
Yeah. Going into high school, like I said, got into the gym. We ended up having like the first gym in my town ever to open, which was really exciting. So, convincing mum, like when they were doing pre-sales, to go down, and little 16-year-old me wasn't even allowed to have a gym membership yet, but they snuck me on and, got in there and started training. 14, my bad, 14.
Wow.
14.
Yeah.
Because the cutoff point was 14 and I was like just before it. So got in, and just every single waking moment was spent on YouTube in forums, just watching bodybuilding, how to train, how to eat, how to do this. And it was just this addiction to it. I loved it. And, along with that came, tracking macros and all this sort of jazz, as well as like a lot at the time of intermittent fasting and stuff like that, which for me at least, what it did was it caused, it was all good at the start, but it ended up leading to what I would do was I would, fast throughout the majority of the day, or I would eat very little throughout the majority of the day. I'd still be doing an absolute shitload of exercise. I'd be training, 5 to 7 days a week. I'd be doing cardio on top of that. I was skipping school to go to the gym. I didn't study. I didn't do anything. I literally did not pay. My entire of high school was pretty much either spent on YouTube looking up bodybuilding or skipping class to go to the gym.
Wow.
Yeah. Don't look at my grades. It's terrible.
I slept all the way through year 12, so it's totally fine.
Yeah.
I still came out with an OP6.
Damn. Solid. I'm from Victoria, so I don't know what the hell that means.
I can be a lawyer.
Shit.
And that's only going to school twice a week.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
Well, I mean, aptitude testing is interesting. It goes far above and beyond the current standard criteria in schools, and but honestly, I don't think it matters. You were following something that you were passionate about, but I think that potentially, from what you're telling me, it became toxic, maybe an obsession.
Oh, 100%.
That looks like the natural progression. And you have to look at this too, is that children and teenagers are so influential. We have such a high impact on their lives for what message we're sending them. And we don't realize it's even the way that we speak about ourselves around them. What they consume is what they become.
See, keep in mind that as I got into the gym, this was right when Instagram launched. This was This was right when fitness YouTube started, this was also right when it started.
Sure, yeah.
And the goal for every single person in the gym in the world was to be known in that field.
Yeah.
It was a sponsorship from a particular brand.
Yeah.
And it put forward a very, I guess, unrealistic,
oh, for sure,
to say the least, perception of what normal reality was. And although I now know, we can look at everything now, and it is very obvious because there's been so many years of, it just being put in your face. Well, of course, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
But at the time, at least for myself, when I was just getting into it and when it was still relatively new, you just, if you weren't at that level, then it was honestly, it was You would do anything.
You felt like a shit kicker if you weren't that level.
100%. 100%.
Which couldn't be further from the truth.
Like, I don't even know what the hell I looked like back then, because I have no photos of me through that entire period of my life. Like, I have no memories really. Like, it's scattered really, because I've just tried to block a lot of that away because of how I felt and because of just the attitude that I had towards it. But it was just, yeah, like, you'd focus on, like, it was every single food to the gram. It was every single calorie. It was, having to output a certain amount per workout, or do a certain amount of this, or balance it out. Or if you ate over too much on one day, then you were cutting out calories on another day, or you were banking up calories so you could eat a cheat meal, or you were banking up calories for multiple days so you could do something else. Yeah. Or you'd go out for dinner with family and you would literally have a fucking breakdown because you couldn't count how much was in it.
Yeah, exactly. There was no, and that's the issue, is that this is where these eating disorders come about, is that they can't regulate. You can't regulate in those situations. I wasn't taught that either. I was the same. I would avoid going out to, no, I can't come out to dinner. Why would you invite me? I can't come out to dinner. Like, it was known. Mariah can't go to the birthday party. She can't eat the birthday cake. Oh, no, you can't do that. It just got to a point where people got so conditioned and used to it that, I didn't even have to chuck a tantrum anymore. I mean, I did too, or just go home and throw up my food. Like, it's because there was no one there to tell you or to teach you how to regulate and to help you with that situation and to assure you that it's okay. 1 or 2 meals here or there is not going to kill everything for you. You're okay. We put so much weight on this idea that any small mistake or away from plan was a giant fuck up. That we were a failure of a human being if that happened. And I can tell you, I remember the feeling. It was like fear. It was nothing but pure fear inside of food, of anything outside of, the schedule or the regime or what was meant to be doing. So it's funny. It's interesting how we have different stories, but similar in a sense that, and also different stages of our lives. But like my parents, my father had locks on the cupboards as well. We literally found food as a tool for our struggle. And as I said previously, people focus so much on the food, don't they? They're like, oh, God, why can't you just eat this? Oh, why can't you just be normal? Why can't you just do this? I'll just let it go. And all that type of stuff actually doesn't help. I remember my parents getting very frustrated with me, sitting at the table, and they'd give me a big portion of whatever we were eating. And obviously this was when I was going through the whole trying to break away from calorie counting thing. And I just sit there and push the plate away. Not in protest, just trying to kind of get through dinner without them noticing. And it was frustration, pure frustration on their behalf, because no one tells you your kid's going to have an eating disorder, that your kid's going to show disordered eating behaviors growing up. You don't have the tools for that. And I mean, back then, this is only, we're only really seeing the surfacing of proper treatment for eating disorders and people actually coming out and talking about them and being open about this stuff now. Like the last 5 years, roughly, I've seen more transparency with this topic now than ever. And I love it. Like, of course it's hard. Of course it's hard to talk about this stuff. But if we keep being quiet, people are going to keep doing what I was doing and trying to take their lives. So I don't ever want anyone to be in that situation. That was actually my main motivator for becoming a coach. I went through my recovery before I competed. I went through the hard yards. I went through not tracking. I didn't track. I stopped tracking. Oh, I'd say probably when I was between the age of 22 and 23, going through my recovery. I went, fuck this. And it's interesting. I teach people how to track macros now. That's my job, right? But I also am there every step of the damn way, and I'm waiting and I'm watching for those signs. And the situations where they go, I've got a meal out with family this weekend. You know, if they're not in competition prep, I'm like, mate, go for it. Sure, it's an important event. If it's every weekend or if it's just complacency, we've got to know the difference between complacency and someone literally being so deathly afraid of going off plan to the extent where they're having mental breakdowns or anxiety attacks.
Yeah.
There is always, with anything in life, a scale of severity. You know, worst case scenario, best case scenario, somewhere in the middle, right? So the somewhere in the middle is looking at, okay, well, if it's your birthday, if it's your anniversary, and you're not competing, and you're giving yourself 6 months to get to your goal, sure, what's on the menu? Sure, let's have a look at the menu. Let's give you a couple of options to work with. Why would you not have someone there to support you through that? And I think people don't think they've got that, you know? They go, oh, look, I'm just going to do this by myself. And I honestly wish that when you, back then, that you had that support. But we didn't. I didn't. There was no such thing as online coaches back then. You know, at 2021, what the fuck's an online coach? It was like Bro Plan or like Protein. That was it, right? It was like, you know, you go to the sup store and the guy gives you diet advice. Like, or it was a dietitian who was, you know, 50, 60 years old sitting in his chair saying, oh, well, you've just got to eat your 3 fruit and 2 to 3 fruit and 5 veg. There was such a divide. There was no sports nutritionist. There's no one working with people, just everyday people, and finding more balance with their food. And then you see the whole COVID thing as well. When COVID came about, you know, everyone's wondering, scratching their heads, why did I put on body fat? You know, why am I lazier than ever? Why is all this happening to me? It's not happening to you. You sat down for 2 years. You didn't get off your ass for 2 years. And it's not this whole eat less, move more. That entire time in our lives, chunk in our lives, basically injected more issues now than ever to obesity. Because people were in denial because they weren't given the information by anybody, let alone the government. Hey, by the way, you sitting on your dot this whole time hasn't really helped the whole body fat thing. And now you're in a position where you're chronically overweight. So having support through this whole process, and it's funny, people think I plug myself. Like, I'm not plugging myself as a coach. I'm plugging every coach in the industry right now. Any coach, having any support through a process like this is so essential, especially if you know that you're that type of person who takes something and runs with it. If you're an addictive personality, you need support. And that's probably going to be most of us. Like, most of us are not going to be able to do this alone. Get help. Like, get help with anything. That's my biggest piece of advice, is even if I could say to anybody, what's the biggest tip I could ever give you in life? If you could go back, what did you achieve the most from? It was a joint effort. I had 3 psychologists. I was in mental health ward. There was a lovely nurse in mental health ward that was better than any psychologist I've ever seen in my life. Like, there were people, it was like a group community effort to heal, right? I didn't do this by myself. So getting support, I think, is the big part of that. It's the start of making changes in your life, sustainable changes. But we need to definitely normalize this concept that, like, you cannot be perfect every day of the year with your diet, specifically if you're not doing something like a comp prep. And that's okay. That's the idea. That's the idea of flexible eating and flexible dieting. That's the idea of, we're trying to teach you how to track macros and calories, and not because we want you tracking macros and calories for the rest of your damn life. We want to take those training wheels off. I haven't tracked a macro or a calorie since September last year, since I finished my show. It's almost a year. Now, I'm sure that nothing crazy has happened to me in that time. You know, I haven't blown out because I fixed that relationship in my mind with food. Food is no longer something I use as a coping mechanism. It is something to nurture my body with. And I don't deprive and I don't overeat. I just find that happy place in the middle. And sometimes there are some days where I do eat 3,500 calories. Of course, you're not going to be able to avoid that. You go out for a meal and the next day you're probably not going to be that hungry. But that's where that balance comes in. And that's where people are struggling. Even just finding the middle ground, you know? Not putting themselves on a shake diet, for fuck's sake. Like, just simple shit, really. And people don't want to hear that this process is simple. It's simple yet complicated. What's required is simple from, like, a data-driven perspective. Like, these are the calories, these are the macros, go. That's simple, right? The concept is simple, but the application is complicated. because it involves human emotion, and it involves learning the intricacies of how people learn and execute, and knowing how to respond to that person. So that's what, as a coach, that's how we have to be adaptable. So people go, the coaches that give the cookie cutter plans. I'm going to be honest with you. For women, our deficit ranges are not actually that different. If you look at a female who's like, I don't know, 40, 50 kilos, I don't know why we're deficiting her, but if you're looking at a light, small, slight female, her deficit will probably be a couple hundred calories lower than someone who's, say, 60, 70, 80 kilos at most. And even someone who's in the higher weight ranges, their deficit might only be 500 calories, maybe 500 to 600 calories higher than the smaller girl. So we're talking like these numbers aren't very big, right? So it's not like when people go individualized nutrition, they go, every person's individual. I mean, yeah, sure. But on the big scale of things, the hard part is not the individualistic nutrition. It's the application. It's getting the person to follow it. It's getting them to adhere. And also removing the guilt around the times that they don't. Getting that really negative, shitty voice and situation to just calm the fuck down for a bit and focus on the things that you're doing well, because positive affirmation and reassurance and connection and, all that love and warmness, it actually drives you forward. That's the thing that keeps you going, right? Is going, I did well. That's what got me out of bed. That's what got me out of my situation, was saying, I'm doing okay. I'm doing good. And then there's that roll-on effect. So it brings us back around to that topic of, if we were to change anything internally, it's the way that we speak to ourselves. Because nothing ever good came from treating yourself like a piece of shit and saying, you're a piece of crap, do this, and if you don't do it, you're a failure. Yeah. Right? Sure, it makes staunch bodybuilders like you look at I don't know, some of the biggest bodybuilders in the world, and they're like, oh, I just got in and get it done. But nurturing ourselves internally actually gets us a lot further.
So there is, I guess, to touch on sort of what you were saying before about, full transparency about things that have happened and all this sort of stuff. So there is, I guess, one particular thing that, it took me the longest time to speak to anyone about it. I always said that I would never speak about it to anyone. And it's been over the past few years that I've just, I've been able to speak to it to a fair few people who are close to me now. But it's something that I guess I've always wanted to be transparent on, that there is a multitude of shame just around it, as well as just a fear of judgment and a fear of people around me. It's what I guess happened in my case was, going through all of those phases and, still going through the weight loss and getting into it all and actually developing a decent physique. I was not in a good place when it was mentally, and it was when you've got the binge eating, you've got the starvation, you've got the skipping class to go to fucking this, that, and the other, and the whole meanwhile, I was just getting more and more frustrated at life and just more aggressive at the people around me, my family. I had my first partner at the time, and it was just this outward, it was everyone's problem. I couldn't actually accept anything myself. And it led to a point where, in this just desperation to try and feel like I actually liked the body that I was in, and this desperation to try and feel like I belonged in a social media in a social media landscape, it led me to being a 16, 17-year-old kid who ended up being on SARMs and PEDs, just trying to feel like I fit into something and that I could actually, live up to this fucking expectation that had been set. And it's it led to a point where all it ended up doing was I got more aggressive at the people around me. I felt worse about the way that I looked. I felt like shit all the fucking time. And then when everything stopped, I ended up going into just a spiral of just suicidal depression for the next 2-3 years. Yeah. Where I blew up that relationship in my face, was just an absolute piece of shit, a nightmare. And I hate the way that I was, not only to her, but to the other people around me at the time. And it led to this spiral where I needed to get the hell out of the whole place, the whole country, just for a few years, just to sort of just work out what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
And try and, just become myself in a sense. And it was like, and even then being over there, it was great for, that while, it was just a new experience, getting to meet new people, do new things. And then, at least for me, when, that like COVID and all that came around, I don't know, I guess I've always sort of struggled when it comes to, this is more targeting down, I guess, like the direct mental health route and just those thoughts. But like isolation is always just like, it fucks with me a lot.
What's interesting is the next step is actually finding joy in isolation.
And luckily now we're kind of at a point where we can do that. At the time though, it was just being stuck in I didn't realize that what I'd been doing for the past 4 months before that was that I was using all this extra noise simply to drown out what was actually in my head from the past 6, 7, from the past like year before that. I was just trying to numb it all out. And when all that went away and I couldn't use that to fill the space anymore, I was just getting flooded by all of that again, plus actually realizing everything that had gone on in this time. And it was just so overwhelming that it was just, again, this massive spiral downwards.
Yeah. It's interesting. Isolation is honestly the most painful thing to start off with. And it actually takes just gritting your teeth through it, right? But like, I agree. That's where my bulimic episodes happened. I was alone. They were triggered by being alone. I couldn't stand myself, right? And I can actually relate to that because you're right. You're not put into that position until you're forced into it, where like everyone else has given up on you, or exactly in the situation of COVID, where, as you said, you were isolated. You had no one around you. I think you described to me when you were in the castle that was really lonely. Yeah.
It was. Like, it sucked because, again, like, I went from being someone who was like, I was an Australian that was traveling overseas, and I was working in a bar, and I was in, like all the really cool places, and it was hanging out with friends every night. And then, I moved into a manor, like a massive ass castle, where they were filming TV shows, and there was hundreds of people there every day. And then within the span of a day, there was no one. And it was just like, I didn't know how to respond to that.
Drastic change.
Yeah. At all. And just an absolute spiral and a half. And then I ended up moving from there to another place, and then just ended up continuing down that, just that path that I was sort of on. And it ended up getting to a point where, I just sort of realized that, at least for me, it got to a point where I made the realization that I was at a point that I was not happy with. But, and I don't know, this might sound crazy to some people, but pretty much what I did was after I'd made the identification, the new goal was, all right, I'm going to push this as far down as I can possibly go, just so I can feel what it feels like to be at rock bottom, or to be as like rock bottom as I can force it to be. I guess my theory behind it was that everyone has a midlife crisis at some point. If I can get this out of the way at 20, sweet. So
you'll live far past 40, I'm sure of it.
It was like, so it was just like just trying to like shoot things down as bad and as negative as they could possibly be, and then rebound back up. Yeah. Again, that's not for everyone. Fucking terrifying, and you have to like. I had to deal with a lot of things internally while doing that.
That's the point,
though. It was something, exactly. It was something that I am glad that I did, and it was, I guess, it was a positive thing out of losing everything that I had. It came down to a point where I had to get back to Australia. I had to get a flight from the embassy, like from the Australian embassy, and the only reason they were able to help me with it was because they'd been in contact for the past few weeks about my mental health and the state that I was in. And then they gave me, I think it was 6 hours notice to get to a flight that was 4 hours away. Ooh. I had a job, I had a lease, I had my things. I literally had to just grab a backpack, not even tell anyone, tell a couple of the guys that were living where I lived. I left half my shit there. My accounts were in the negative from paying for the flight back because it was so expensive. So I'd lost my life savings. I had to leave most of my things in the apartment in the UK. I didn't have time to call my job and tell them that I was leaving. I didn't have time to call my landlord and tell them I was leaving. Get to a flight, rushing through like trains and all that to get to it. Get back to Australia after like a 30-odd hour flight with it was like an 18-hour layover in a shoebox-sized room that we weren't allowed to leave. And then back into Canberra for 2 weeks in hotel quarantine, where I'm also on mental health watch the entire goddamn time because I didn't know what the fuck was happening.
Crisis.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Crisis is literally where it's actually crazy, but I honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it openly. Like, it's not something I'm going to say on camera that you should be doing.
I'm not saying that anyone should do
it.
No.
But you're right. Like, in those moments of, I admit, I think that there were points before my suicide attempts where I probably could have saved myself. Where I knew where I was headed, right? I was like, here I go. You know, like, I'm going down the rabbit hole. Yeah. May as well fucking take everyone with me, right?
Hey, I mean, do you want to know what it was that actually made me call it and bounce back? Like say this is enough, let's try and get back up from it? Pretty much what happened was I got back into a small little country town where I lived. I did not adjust very well to being back there. I got back, everyone was the exact same. Everything was the exact same. Nothing had
I'm from
changed.
Bundaberg, mate. I feel it.
Yeah, I mean, small little regional town in Victoria.
Yeah.
It's like, I had gone through, so much while I was away that coming back to that and just people being so oblivious to what the hell was actually out there, I just didn't know how the fuck to respond. It was like I couldn't have a conversation with anyone anymore because I was a completely different person and I was just alienated from where I had grown up. And it was not even, and then also coming out of hotel quarantine from there, it was like not even, it was probably, I think it was a couple of weeks after getting back, and I got drunk as all hell one night and was like, all right. It was a drive to, it was a contemplation of, do I just run this off the fucking road? Ended up getting put up by the cops, DUI, lost my license for a year.
Wow.
Coming out of that, it was just, I guess, that realization, well, having my mother called at 4 a.m. And having to explain what had happened. Actually, no, they didn't even call her, sorry. After being taken in, having all my photos and all that done and all that jazz, they took me home. So yeah, escort by 2 cops at 4 a.m. And having to see my mum.
Yeah.
That was where I kind of hit that
broke
point.
You.
Yeah. And then we've just been trying to be better.
I can 100% vouch for the idea that you are. Like, wholeheartedly from where that was for you. Just, wow. That's heavy. Thank you for telling me and for talking about it. I know that, I know how hard it is to sometimes admit to this stuff. You know, being human and making choices that we regret but we can't take back. We can't take it back. You can't take back any of that. And that's actually fine. If it makes you feel any better, I also lost my license. Not to DUI, but I tell you what, I may as well have been. I mean, we laugh about it, and this is honestly why I drive as safely as possible now. I'm a terrible driver as it is, but I lost my license to accumulation of speeding fines, running red lights, driving without a seatbelt, talking on the phone, like you name it, I fucking did it. Between the space of, would you believe when I had my eating disorder, between 20 and 23, and I lost my license and I drove when I lost it, and I drove on the suspended license, and then I really lost it for a year. And I hauled my motherfucking groceries into the bus every night, right? Because I was dating a bodybuilder at the time too, like 110 kilo, you know, like big beefy fella. Boys gotta eat. It was my responsibility to bring the freaking groceries home on the buses in Brisbane. Mind you, catching buses from Mount Gravatt to, you know, Stafford, I think it was. Like,
that's not a pleasant
it was
time.
trash. It was just awful. Like, you know, you're talking, I was coming up from rock bottom, right? But like, I'd lost my license along the way as well. I don't think anyone would ever pass any judgment on me for that, and I don't think anyone should pass any judgment on you for your experience. But either way, it doesn't fucking matter. Do you know? I honestly am used to people looking at my life and going, what a shitstorm. Holy shit, what a shitstorm. I grew up in poverty. I was used to people looking at me like I was a piece of shit. You know? I grew up, and my mother is fine with me talking about this because we were poor as shit. Like, we were so poor. I slept on a futon. Like, I was happy as a kid for the most part, there were a lot of really dark stages of that. You know, that period of time was very dark in my life. Like, there's a lot of really heavy stuff that I won't even go into. Things that should never happen to a child happened to me. And out of people's control. I'll just say that. But poverty taught me to be humble. I wore my brother's clothes. And when I by that, I mean I only wore my brother's clothes. I didn't have anything else. People thought I was a little boy. Like, I also had a disease that rotted my teeth away, which is very rare. You can look it up. And it rotted all my top and bottom teeth to the point where they were just these brown stubs from when they came out of my mouth, you know? Like, so the whole bullying thing, I'm no stranger to that. This didn't exist. You know, this started happening around 16 when my face started looking less like a smash crab. Like, but from that, I relied on my intelligence, my education, the things that were wholesome about me. I spent a lot of my time in the library. I had the shit kicked out of me and beaten out of me as a kid, as a girl. People would kick me and throw things at me and split my lip, you name it. Like, every single day it was relentless. In class, if I answered a question, I was too smart. Like, that's why I was top 1 percentile of maths, social science and English in Australia, aptitude tested at 12 years old, year 7, because I needed to get the fuck out of there. My mother applied for a scholarship for me to go to a private school because where I was at Rosedale State School. Now, if anyone knows where Rosedale is.
Yeah. I do.
Population, nothing. Right, we had like a church and like a touch football field, and mind you, like we just kind of switched between those two places because the post office shut down eventually. But that was my start years, right? And people treated me, I had no friends. I had one, she's lovely. We're still friends now, a Filipino girl. And I think that was my actual first experience of like being accepted into culture, like back then, because her mother was just like, you're my baby too, like, and would make me food in the afternoon. It was the best. But anyway, going off on a tangent, that's why I'm non-judgmental, because I grew up in an environment where people were like, you're a piece of shit, you're trash. My mum was a teacher as well at the school. So, like, I couldn't get away from being bullied because, you know what I mean? Like, people were like, your mum's a teacher.
No, exactly. So I'm from a little town called Moe in regional Victoria.
It's like we were on, like different universes.
Yeah, no. So, you know how I was saying that, like, in primary school, I'd get bullied a lot, and then I'd go to, like, the principal or whatever, and it would just get worse from there. Yeah, it got to the point where my mother actually ended up becoming a teacher's aide.
Yeah. And that makes it worse too.
Yeah, because she wanted to help. Right, she wanted to help and support, you know, not only myself, but, you know, other children who were there. She did a friggin' fantastic job of it. But for me, it made my side get a lot worse for that period of time. You know, and luckily, again, when those kids that were doing it graduated, that was pretty much when that, I guess, stopped. So there was like a year and a half, 2 year gap where it wasn't as bad. But yeah,
you know,
it was interesting.
You know, it's interesting. The people who bullied me, though, I have quite a wholesome story about this. The people who bullied me, I actually had one of them. The other ones never did apologize. And also the other really deep, awful stuff that happened to me as a child, that was never patched over either, mind you. So there's stuff that, and I think a lot of women can relate to this, that you know, there are many sexual assault victims out there, and it's just a part of life. And I hate saying that, but it's so common now that, you know, every second person you talk to has that story. And I won't go into it because it's just not necessary. Yeah. But I mean, I had that, you know, it's like, that was my introduction to like that world, and intimacy was, you know, people beating the crap out of me. And then in the other realm of having my own personal space, I didn't. So I was sexualized from a really young age, but I was also treated like absolute shit and boys. These were boys who were beating me up. These were not girls. They were men, boys. So I could have become a man hater. Like, very easily could have become a man hater. I could have just like been like, fuck men. You've done nothing but fuck me over my whole life. Because then I went straight from the bullying situations into a nightclub environment where I was working, where people were, right, sexualizing me in the nightclub environment, looking at my titties all night. And, you know, I went from that, and then I progressed from that into this relationship with this bodybuilder who was abusing peds and who was violent. And I'm talking as violent as a person can physically get, who was also incredibly, well, he was a liar. He was and I hate the word narcissist because it's thrown around a lot these days, but he was sociopathic. He slept with 20 different women across the space of 7 years that I know of, without talking about it. So then there was obviously putting me at risk as well, which I now have.
As you say, you're just going to have 20 random chicks just coming after you because they don't know what the fuck's going on and they think that you're doing something.
Well, it's funny. I kind of found out about those are the 20 I found out about, but obviously there's probably more. And it was just constant gaslighting. And, if this didn't happen, then this wouldn't happen. And, the whole, I could go on for ages about the being disloyal to me but the infidelity. And so then it created this awful paranoia inside me and probably fueled my eating disorder. Because I hit the peak of my eating disorder. I developed that in the start of the relationship because it was always glorified to be as tiny as possible and for him to be as big as possible. And I covered for him all the time. I covered for his steroid use. I covered for all these, you know what I mean? Like I covered his tracks for him all the time. He had terrible issues with money as well. I constantly covered and protected him. And yet he talked shit about me. He made, I was this crazy girl trying to kill herself. And, it's like no one talked about the multiple times I caught him cheating because you don't talk about that. You can't stay in the relationship and then be upset because the person's cheating on you. Like, that's your fault. You stayed, right? That's what people say. It's fucked. But hey, like, when you live with them and you've got no other way out and, your means of getting out of there means that you've got nothing but what you've got.
And again, it's kind of what we were saying before. It's like, it's very easy to say something. The actually doing it.
Correct.
Is very, very difficult. And again, although the difficult thing is probably the thing you should do, it doesn't always seem that obvious and it's not really that clear cut. It's never clear.
When they've manipulated you into staying into the situation, you pretty much think that you're the piece of shit.
It's like you're invested and you believe it. Like,
yeah, you think you can do better.
Yeah.
You think that you can just be better for that person and that they will change. But I think 3 or 4 years in, I left the first time when I tried, the second attempt on my life, I left. And then he begged me back for a year and a half straight. Like, it was an obsession. And then I eventually caved, and moved back to Brisbane. And but then it didn't last much longer than that, maybe a year. And same thing, same cycle. He also smoked a ton of weed as well. Like, it was just heaps of substance abuse, not on my behalf. I'd cleared myself of all of that. I quit drinking at 20, 21. Like, I went through all the alcohol abuse. Like, I did that. I honestly drank myself into oblivion numerous times where I was hospitalized when I was a kid as well. Like, if you could say there was a rocky ride, it started from as early as I can remember and pretty much up until I recovered from anorexia. Because I realized that throughout that life, I laid down while people treated me like shit. I did. I let it happen. Because I thought that was just life. I thought that, I don't know, like from a 6-year-old, like I thought that, okay, this is what's happening now, I guess. I let men treat me like shit. And I got to around 23, 24 and I finally went, fuck this. Like, I couldn't say fuck anymore if I tried. But I got up and I packed my shit and I left and I went and moved in with one of my best friends. And you know what? The relationship still dragged on for another 4 years. But I got myself out and I never moved back. And when it finally finished, I was 6 or 7 years into my training life, right? And so he'd already competed in shows, right? It was okay for him to compete. He'd already competed. And the whole time I was like, people always said to me, you should compete. You've got the physique for it. Like, I was bodybuilding before it was cool. Like, people thought I was weird. Back in 2011, 2012, like, people thought I was bonkers. And especially in a small country town.
Hey, I was the kid getting into the gym at the same same time.
Rife. Like, why don't get too muscly? Like, don't get too big. Okay, well, if I do get too big, I'd like you to give me a high five because that's the goal. So
yeah,
there was so much judgment passed and like I got to 26 or 27. And so many people had like forced this idea in my face. You should compete. And I got to that age and the final straw that broke the camel's back was that he started an affair behind my back with a close friend of mine. And mind you, like, still to this day, they both kind of swear their innocence in it all, and that's fine. Like, everyone's got their different side of the story. It's all good. Honestly, different perspectives, whatever. I worked with her for years, and to me, she said that she had no loyalty to me. So I think that was, I don't know. We have different ideas of loyalty, I guess. You know, it's kind of like, I think that there's a rule there where you just don't go there, especially if you've been introduced to the person while they're dating. Like, just don't do it. Don't do it. Like, save it. Anyway, that caused some shit, a lot of shit. Like, and I'm talking, I did some questionable things the next 2 years across their relationship. Like, I broke some of my own moral values in that situation because I was bitter. I was angry. Like, I was just full of anger, and I was like, fuck her, fuck him, and fuck what anyone thinks of me. I don't care. I just got to a point where I was like, you know what? I just want to win this situation because I feel like I got fucked over really badly. I learned that obviously wasn't the solution either, you know. So around 26, 27, when that happened, I was like, I actually approached a good friend of mine, Stuart Brooks, and he hadn't actually coached any female competitors into a show before. I said, mate, there's no one I would want to coach me except you. We've been friends for years. And he's like, all right, yeah, let's give it a go. I was like, let's compete, you know. In my first show, I competed in figure. Straight into figure. Like,
yeah, just no warm-up. Let's just go gun-ho.
I didn't even know there were other divisions. I'm going to be honest. Like, when I competed in figure, no joke, in 2019, I was so oblivious. Like, I didn't even know there was bikini and fitness and sports.
When you just have this internal feeling that you know what it's right, and then it just happens to be exactly right.
For me at the time, I think that it was that or it was relapse. And I wasn't relapsing for shit, you know? Like, I had done all that work on my recovery. There was no way I was going to relapse. Yeah. So I decided that's it. I wanted to compete. And I did. I did a 16-week prep. I was in pretty good condition beforehand anyway. So really, like, you know, it wasn't that much effort to actually get to stage. But I remember, like, receiving phone calls from this ex-DV partner where he was literally calling me a piece of shit and telling me to go kill myself. And, like, some pretty, like, you know what I mean? If you've had a toxic partner, you're probably going, yeah, you're like, yep, I've been there. And I was out on the phone doing my steps and literally tears streaming down my face, like having a mental breakdown. Mind you, a year prior, we'd lost a child to me competing. Actually, not even a year. They started the affair 3 months after. And I can't tell you, of all the things I've been through in my life, the anorexia, the bullying, having the shit beat out of me, the sexual assault, like the DV relationships, having my partner kick me physically, like actually kick me and like strangle me, like you name it, everything painful on this earth. There was nothing more painful than when I lost my child. And I remember that feeling of like, you've already taken so much away from me. Because it wasn't the whole situation, and this is something I've never even spoken about, losing this child, is my first pregnancy. I had deep sadness and shame and regret and aching, and like nothing felt right from then onwards. I was a different person, and nothing was as painful as that. There was no grief more painful than that. So I decided to compete, and for me, that was like, I'm going to do this for me, and I'm going to do this for the version of me that is no longer exists. I'm going to just grieve for that person. That person is fucking gone, and I'm going to start with this person. And I prepped into ICN. I didn't do what everyone else does. I didn't follow people on social media. I didn't watch their stories. I didn't even know who I was versing. I had no idea who my competitors were. I was oblivious. And I was so blissfully ignorant, because I was just like this. I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep going forward. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. No matter how many abusive phone calls I get, no matter how much this person keeps trying to get at me, I'm going to keep going. I knew he wanted to spoil it. I knew he wanted to ruin it for me. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I was single as shit. Like I was like, I'm not touching men with a 20-foot pole. But like I just was like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm just prepping. It's about me. This is me time. No one's taking this away from me. I remember being there on show day, backstage with all these amazing women, like really inspirational, jacked as shit. Like, holy crap. I was so in awe. Like, I still am. Like, these women are just everything to me. And I was like, this is the best. I loved it. It was so good. It was so, so good. And I remember being on stage and just like grinning from ear to ear. So when you watch the videos back,
this is the first time I went to a show.
It's amazing.
The ICN season B last year, man. Like I'd always loved the sport and never actually got to a show. When I was just there in the crowd, man.
We're so happy
in the backstage. Man, I can't even express like just how that felt.
We're miserable and hungry, but also like so high on life and adrenaline that like none of that matters. You're on stage shaking like a leaf and you're like, yes, this is the best. I don't know why, but I feel good. And I was up there and I shit you not, I had no idea what was going to happen. Like, you know when people go, oh, like I might have a good chance of placing on the podium. I didn't even know what the podium was. I didn't even know that they did trophies.
Give us a sticker or...
I was like, I don't know what... Anyway, I just was like in my own little la-la land and I went on stage the first time and I won my... there was no... It's funny. Because no one ever competes in classic figure for the first time, there was no first timers division. Like there was meant to be, but I was the only person in it.
Guess you win.
So they were like, Mariah, we can't actually... Like I missed out. You know, like all the bikini first timers, they get to do their first timers division. I never got to do my first timers division. Like I actually got robbed of my first timers division because my first time competing had to be in the novice division. Because then I actually had people to compete against. So my novice, because back then they didn't have rookies either, but novice division, I stepped on the stage, I gave it everything I had. I had this long blonde hair, like natural blonde, hair, pulling the microphone out. I had this natural long blonde hair and this hot pink suit on, and I was aptly named backstage Muscle Barbie. And, you know, just
nice. Solid.
Like a very affectionate term, which I've now grown out of. Jacked muscle Barbie now. Muscle.
Hunched Barbie.
Yeah, like Hulk Barbie. Anyway, I remember waiting there, like, and I won. I won, and I actually cried because I'm not a crier. I'm actually not a crier. Like, I'm not one that, you know, girls that cry at the drop of the hat. No,
I cry at the drop of a hat.
but I cry when important shit happens because it's so moving for me. Like and you know, when they announced that I'd won my novice division, my legs went shaky. I was like, oh, what? Me? What? You sure it's not that guy? I mean, girl? Like, you sure it's not them? Like, and they called me up and I that was, to me, that was actually massive because I was like, I could go home now. Like, I was like, oh my God, what? Oh, yeah, cool. I got what? I get a first trophy? So humbling.
And then they're like, but we got overalls to come.
Then I went into overalls. And the second time I was on stage, I won an overall. I won classic figure overall. And again, like, I was just blown away. Like, I was like, you know, there weren't many figure competitors, but yeah, it was just life-changing. I think, honestly, that was the point where I was like, I think I have more than I thought I had.
Yeah.
And not just from a physique perspective, but like, hold on,
grit.
What can I do? Yeah. You know, what can I actually do? So then I launched my business full time.
Solid.
Like a month later.
Solid.
And I was like, here we go. And I went from, like, transparently, I went from earning $50K a year managing a gym to earning just under $200K a year now, is what I do. And I'm not a numbers person because I actually, like, I don't, you know, parade around with like designer handbags and shit. I'm not a person who's like, here's all my money, like, look at my importance. It's more about, for me, it represents what's possible.
I was going to say, yeah, like there is something to be said. Like, I feel like there's definitely something to be said about the numbers. I think people shy away from the numbers a lot, or people get caught up on the numbers, or they view it as
it's not a flex.
Negative thing.
It's not a flex.
Realistically, like you said, it just shows what is actually capable. It's one hell of a damn achievement as well. Like, that is, like, to be able to cross into that kind of barrier is fucking amazing. And come on, let's be real. People who say that that is not a positive thing to talk about, or say that that is you flexing or being fully yourself, are probably just people who wish they had that.
Yeah, honestly, I think years ago when I used to find out about people who were doing really well for themselves, I think envy got in the way a lot. But I'm just gonna remind you that like I was the little girl who grew up wearing her brother's hand-me-downs and who had holes in her school shoes. And my parents could not afford to take me to the movies. They could not afford to do nice things. I didn't have Barbie things. I had some Barbies, but I mean, I think one of them my brother gave me like as a gift, and I kept it for so long. Like I held on to things for so long because we just didn't have stuff. Like my room was so bare and so stark as a child because we didn't have stuff, and food was not plentiful, right? We had brown rice, we had eggs, we had the basics. My mother was studying full time and she was a teacher as well, and she was not on a good salary. And my stepfather was in and out of work. But we just didn't have enough money. We never had money, right? And I'm not a person who came from a position where I'm like, I had fucking nothing. I paid for my first car by myself. Like I paid for everything. From the age of 14, I got a job and everything I paid for myself from there. I was on a scholarship at school. Like everything I worked so hard for from a young age to get myself out of those shit situations. To be where I am now means more than just the dollars, because I would be out there spending it.
Hey, hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did find something useful, please do share it with someone else you think could find it useful as well. If you're over on Spotify, please do leave a review as well. If you're over on YouTube, consider dropping a subscribe, a like, a comment, and all that good stuff. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.